Blackwood Ridge had always been the kind of forest people avoided once the sun started going down. The trees were old and packed tightly together, their branches forming a dark ceiling that blocked most of the light even during the day. For Ethan Cole, though, the forest wasn't something to fear. It was something to explore. Ever since he was a kid, he had spent his free time studying animal trails, setting trail cameras, and learning how the woods worked. By 17, he knew almost every path through the forest. But that October afternoon felt different from the start. Ethan had convinced his best friend Maya Torres to hike deeper than usual, past the old logging road and into a quiet part of the woods few people ever visited. The deeper they walked, the quieter the forest became. Normally the woods were alive with birds, insects, and the constant rustling of small animals moving through the brush. But here, there was nothing. No birds. No distant sounds. Just the wind sliding slowly through the trees. When they finally reached a small clearing surrounded by tall pines, Ethan noticed something strange. The ground along one narrow trail looked packed down, as if something heavy used that path often. But there were no clear footprints, no hoof marks, nothing that looked like it belonged to a normal animal. Curious, Ethan attached one of his trail cameras to a thick cedar tree facing the path. Maya watched quietly, occasionally glancing around the forest as if expecting something to step out from between the trees. Before they left, she thought she saw movement in the distance. Something tall slipping behind the shadows of the woods. Ethan laughed and told her it was probably just the wind moving branches. But even he couldn't shake the feeling that something in that forest had been watching them the entire time. 3 nights later, Ethan couldn't sleep. The memory card from the trail camera had been sitting on his desk all evening, and curiosity finally got the better of him. When he loaded the images onto his laptop, the first few pictures looked normal. Empty forest path. A few leaves moving in the wind. But then the images changed. In one frame, something appeared at the very edge of the camera's view. At first it was hard to understand what he was looking at. 2 pale shapes stretched out from the darkness like long fingers gripping the side of the frame. In the next image, the creature stepped into the path. Ethan stared at the screen, trying to convince himself it was just a deer caught at a strange angle. But the shape was wrong. The legs were too long. The body was thin and twisted in a way that didn't look natural. And its head was tilted as if it were studying the camera. The eyes reflected the infrared flash so brightly they looked completely white. Ethan immediately called Maya and told her to come over. When she saw the images herself, the room fell silent. The last photo was the worst one. The creature was no longer standing on the trail. Instead, it was right in front of the camera lens. So close that only part of its face filled the frame. One pale eye. A stretched jaw. And something that almost looked like a smile. Neither of them could explain what they were seeing, but one thing was clear. Whatever the camera had captured was not a normal animal. The next morning Ethan showed the pictures to his older sister Lena Cole. Unlike Ethan, Lena had grown up listening to stories about Blackwood Ridge from older people in town. When she saw the images, she didn't laugh or try to explain them away. Instead, she looked genuinely worried. She told them about something their grandfather used to say about the deeper parts of the forest. According to him, there were places where hunters stopped talking and moved quietly because the woods sometimes listened back. Wanting answers, the 3 of them visited Walter Haynes, a retired forest ranger who had spent most of his life working in those woods. Walter studied the photos carefully before setting them down on the table. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked like someone who had been expecting something like this for years. Walter told them there had been reports in the past. Strange figures seen between trees at night. Animals disappearing. Campsites disturbed with no clear explanation. But no one ever had real proof. Until now. He warned them not to go back to that clearing. Not at night. Not even during the day if they could avoid it. When Ethan asked what the creature was, Walter didn't give a direct answer. Instead, he said something that stuck with them long after they left the cabin. "Whatever lives out there," he said quietly, "it doesn't hunt the way animals do. It watches first." Over the next few days, strange things started happening. At first they were small details that could easily be ignored. Ethan began hearing quiet tapping sounds against his bedroom window late at night. When he looked outside, nothing was ever there. Maya found unusual impressions in the dirt behind her fence that didn't look like normal footprints. They were narrow and deep, as if something heavy had balanced on the front part of its foot. Lena noticed the neighborhood felt different after dark. Fewer people outside. More lights turning off early. Ethan tried to convince himself they were all just imagining things because of the pictures from the camera, but then another trail camera disappeared. Ethan had secretly placed a second one near the creek without telling anyone. When he returned to check it, the camera was gone. Only the strap remained, hanging loosely from the tree. For deep scratches marked the bark above it. The marks were higher than Ethan could reach even if he stretched his arms as far as possible. That night, just after midnight, the power in their house flickered and went out completely for several seconds. During those few moments of darkness, Ethan heard something move across the roof above his bedroom. Slow footsteps. Heavy but controlled. When the lights came back on, the house was silent again. Despite Walter's warning, Ethan couldn't ignore what had happened. He needed answers. Eventually he convinced Maya and Lena to return to the clearing one more time. They planned to go during the day and stay only long enough to collect more evidence. When they reached the cedar tree where the first camera had been mounted, they noticed something disturbing. The bark was covered in long curved marks, carved deep into the wood as if something had dragged sharp claws across it repeatedly. Nearby they found the remains of a deer lying on the forest floor. But it wasn't torn apart the way a predator would leave it. The body was strangely untouched, almost arranged carefully. While examining the area, Lena discovered the missing camera partially buried beneath leaves. As Ethan checked the memory card, the sky above the forest began to darken with approaching storm clouds. That was when Maya looked toward the tree line and froze. Standing between two tall pines was a figure unlike anything they had ever seen. It was tall, pale, and unnaturally thin. Its arms hung too long at its sides, and its head tilted slightly as if observing them. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It simply watched. They didn't stop running until they reached the truck. Back at home, Ethan immediately checked the footage from the recovered camera. Most of the video was corrupted or filled with static, but a few clips remained intact. The first showed a deer walking cautiously into the clearing before suddenly sprinting away as if frightened by something unseen. In the next clip, the camera shifted slightly as if something had touched it. Then the creature appeared. It stepped into view. Slowly, moving with stiff, unnatural movements. It circled the camera, examining it carefully. The most disturbing part wasn't the creature itself. It was the sound recorded in the background. At first it was just static. But when Ethan increased the volume, they heard a voice. A familiar voice. It was Ethan's own voice whispering, "Maya, over here." But Ethan had never been there that night. Another clip followed. This time the voice sounded like Maya calling out softly in the darkness. The creature wasn't just watching them. It was learning their voices. That night they stayed at Walter Haynes' cabin on the edge of the forest. Walter believed the creature had already begun testing them, trying to draw them closer by imitating familiar voices. As darkness settled over Blackwood Ridge, the woods grew silent again. Hours passed without anything happening. Then, sometime after midnight, 3 slow knocks sounded against the cabin door. No one moved. A voice came from outside. It sounded exactly like Ethan. Calm. Familiar. "Lena, open the door." Lena gripped the edge of the table but didn't respond. Minutes later another voice came from near the window. This time it sounded like Maya. The creature circled the cabin for hours, repeating voices, tapping walls, scraping the roof. But it never tried to break in. It only watched and waited. When morning finally came, Walter opened the door. Outside, a line of strange footprints led back toward the forest. The woods looked peaceful again, but none of them believed that peace would last. Somewhere deep in Blackwood Ridge, something was still out there. Watching. Learning. Waiting for the next person who might answer when it calls.